Hey guys, Jeffries here, and welcome to what is essentially a requested series. Basically, I got a message from James Perry, who is the reason I did the database tutorial videos. For those of you who haven't watched that, I strongly suggest you check that out. That's where I show you how to use the Football Manager editor in order to create your own teams, or create your own players, create your own staff, whatever it is you want to do. But he asked if I could show you guys sort of what players to sign, bargain buys, good players for different leagues, things like that. So I've taken him up on that offer, and I am going to do a series of, let me work it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 videos for each league in the English league system on this game that you can control. So we are currently in the Skrill South as Whitehawk. For those of you who don't know, Whitehawk is a team just outside Brighton, I believe. I think I drove past their stadium just the other day, thinking about it. They were more recently involved in it. Well, they weren't personally. A few of their players were involved in a match-fixing scandal. That might be where you've recognised the name from, if there's any of you out there thinking, I've heard of them, but I can't think where. That's where. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but in some ways it might be a blessing in disguise, because it raised the profile of the club, and you know, the club themselves weren't anything to do with the scandal. They just happened to be that the players involved played for Whitehawk. But yeah, enough of that before I say too much. This is Whitehawk FC. They are in the Skrill South. They have quite a good budget, actually. Estimated value is £525,000 with a loan debt of 50 grand. So, you know, it's not the best, but it's not bad. They've got 25 season ticket holders, which is a small number. But their actual transfer budget, I'll skip these meetings because I'm not that bothered about that, and all this stuff I'm not that bothered about either. They should have some decent scouts. Let me just check that quickly. Yeah, there's a scout. Anyway, that's not necessarily important, because the simple thing to do would be to go onto this player list here, go to Scouted Recommendation. This is a new tab I've started using, and then you would go to Contract Status Expired, things like that. That's what you'd do for a team that have no transfer budget. However, there are a couple of players who I would like to look at early, and the first one is this guy here, Victor Sapota. He's currently at... Wait, that's not him. Oh dear. Oh, there he is. There we go. Striker. 18 years old. Formerly at Spurs. Scout reports. I can get a scout report on him, but if I go back to his overview, you can see here not all his stats are visible, but he is a good player that I like to sign. He tends to play as my target man. The reason I chose Whitehawk in particular for this episode is because I've played as Whitehawk on this game before, and I managed to get them from the Skrill South to League 2 via consecutive promotions. And not just consecutive promotions, consecutive league titles. And that is, I won Skrill South in my very first season, and then I won the Skrill Premier the very next season. And I didn't do it by a landslide number of points. In fact, I think I won the Skrill Premier by 1 point, and I think I won the Skrill South on goal difference. So it's not, you know, it's not like we ran away with the league or anything like that. I didn't find the secret, buy all the really good players and storm the league. This isn't You Don't Win Anything with Kids. This is me trying to work within a budget, because believe it or not, for those of you who have seen You Don't Win Anything with Kids, you might have seen me throwing money at a couple of players. You might have seen me throwing money at quite a lot of problems in the series. That's not normally how I like to play the game. I tend to go for the small teams with not much of a budget and see which players I can sign. Now, Victor Sapota is one of those players. Like I said, I play him in as the target man of my system, and he does okay. Can't see his heading traits right now, but I think they're sort of between 10 and 15, which is pretty good for a striker in the non-league. That's pretty good. And you can see things like first touch, dribbling, long shots, they're all above 10. and things like off the ball as well, and his work rate, that does improve. Bear in mind that all these stats are just right now. Once you sign him and your coaches get a good look at him, these stats start to improve. So he's definitely a striker who I would recommend. I'm trying to remember how to spell his name. Whoops, pressed the wrong button. This isn't going to come up with anybody. No, it's not. I'm trying to remember how to spell his name. There he is. Richie Barrelhay. Let's just assume that's how you pronounce his surname. You got the spelling there though, so feel free to write that down. 20 years old, also a striker. What happened was, in my Whitehawk career, was I got halfway through the first season, and Sapota was doing really, really well for me, although he only joined 2 months after the season had started, and that's when I discovered him. You know, good player, Zapata, but he couldn't score all the goals by himself. I needed someone else who can play in the team alongside him. I actually changed my system from a 1-striker to a 2-striker once I found this guy here, who I'm just going to call Baroilhay, because, yeah, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Someone correct me on that if anyone out there does know. Let's just call him Richie. He comes from, originally from Nice, and then Fulham, and then TPS, RKC, and then Nuneaton, which is a strange place to go from all these teams. You suddenly end up at Nuneaton, but that's where he came from. Again, I can't get you his detailed reports because I need to scout him, but again, a really, really good recommended player. Both he and Zapata can alternate as to who plays the target man and who plays the advanced forward, which, it's what you want from a system like that. You can swap your strikers, and your defenders don't know. Sorry, the opposition defenders don't know who they're marking because the strikers keep swapping places. Something else which I forgot to mention as well is Zapata can also be retrained as an attacking centre midfielder. So again, it's the whole thing of 1 minute he's playing up front, and then suddenly you might change into like a 4-2-3-1 system and play Zapata behind Barrelhay, and then suddenly it's the centre back who was marking Zapata is now playing slightly further up the field because they have to keep following him wherever he goes. And if he drops slightly deeper behind the striker, you can really open up defences by doing that. And that's where the third player comes into play. Again, I'm hoping he actually appears on this list. Here he is, Michael Bryan. Again, he might not look like he has the best stats, but I guarantee you this guy will get you goals in the non-league. Skrill Premier maybe is his ceiling, but Skrill South, Skrill North even as well, and Skrill Premier, this guy will get you goals. 23 years old, so he's not the youngest player out there. You can see he started his career at Watford. He actually played a few times for Watford, which is pretty cool. Then he went to Bradford and again played a few games for them. Daventry, so you can see here already there's a bit of a dip in his career. Only scored 1 career goal, but I promise you that will improve if you play him in the right position. He then went on to Corby and then to Hendon, but, oops, wrong button. You can sign this guy on a free transfer. He's on a non-contract terms with Hendon, so you can just go approach to sign and bring him into your team. And like I said, he'll get you goals. He can play as an attacking right midfielder, but preferably retrain him so he can also play as the cam, because again, it's to do with cover and strength and depth and things like that. You can play Zapata in that role, you can play Bryan in that role. There's so many different options for players you can play in that role. And yeah, for attacking options, those 3 are the go-to guys, I would say. What I'm going to do now is make a cut here, and then I'm going to assemble what I think is a pretty good team for this. I will also show you the Whitehawk team already as it is, because there's a few players in there that you could sign for your teams who will help you out in the long term. And it does depend on what team you pick as well, of course, because even when you're setting your character up, like I've put myself as being a former international footballer. You don't have to do that. You can go for professional footballer, semi-professional footballer, and I can't even remember what the other option is. And depending on what option you choose there, that will of course affect your reputation. in the game, and some players might not want to work with you if you haven't got a very big reputation already within football. So like I said, I'm going to make a cut here, and then when I come back I'll show you the players I've signed plus the White Hawk team as it is already. So I'll see you in a minute, guys. Okay guys, so we're back, and I must admit I've hit a little bit of a brick wall. I'm just going to try one more, see if I can get Richie on board. Yeah, this seems to be the problem. At the moment, these players aren't interested in contract discussions, but I promise you they will be. I think you just need a couple of weeks in game just to get settled in, and you know, get the team ready and things like that. And then once you've got your own coaches in place as well, then they'll jump on board, no problem. Right, this is the Whitehawk team. And straight away I'm going to name just a few players who I think can make the difference between a relegation and a promotion. First player, Lee Hills here. Left back, formerly of Stevenage, so I know a little bit about him, although I didn't see him play that much because in real life at least he's quite injury prone. On here he's not so bad. Actually, you tend to get a full season out of him. Plays quite a few games. Again, you can see his reports now. He can be a leading player for most Skrill Premier sides, and considering the fact that you're a league below that, fantastic news. He can also be a good League 2 left back in the future. So if you can keep him fit and keep him developing, wrong button again. You've got a good little player here on your hand. He's only 23, so he's the same age as Barrelhay, I think. Or, no, sorry, he's not the same age as Barrelhay. He's the same age as Michael Bryan, that's right. So, you know, he's still got many, many years left in him. And this is the crucial bit here. You can retrain him to play all the way down the left-hand side. And you can also have him as a backup right back as well if things don't quite go to plan. What ends up happening in leagues like this is you do sometimes have to get rid of your high earners. So, for example, here now, if I went into the wages, Jake Robinson, Lewis Wilson, Tom Cadmore, they'll all be on the list of players to go first because they're the highest earners. For those of you who haven't watched my Football Manager The Basics series, I talked a little bit there as well about which players do you get rid of first. You get rid of the players with the highest value, try and get some money from that, and you get rid of the players with the highest wages, and you try and get some money back from that. That's always the key. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about good players. So, if you happen to join any other team in this league, so, you know, Basingstoke, I think Bath are the richest team in the league, so they're a good one to join. And then you've got teams like Ebbsfleet, and if you really want a challenge, you've got Farnborough, Dover, Concord Rangers, they've got some good players as well. I'm just going to use a little bit of my experience in this league now to tell you which players I think will be good for you guys to sign. So, if you're not at Whitehawk, Lee Hills is always a good player to sign. You've got Jake Robinson here, who's apparently worth a lot of money and is highly recommended from the coaches. Personally, I don't think he's all that good. And he's 26 years old, so it's not even like he's young and he's got time to develop. So he's an avoid all costs player in my opinion. But a good player to go for is Lewis Wilson. Now I said Michael Bryan gets you goals down the right hand side. If you end up training Bryan as a centre attacking midfielder, Wilson is a good right winger to replace him. They work well together as well, they pass the ball between each other well, and it all looks good. The way they link up, the way they set attacks going, and the fact that if you can also play Wilson as a striker, so you can end up with Bryan crossing the ball in and Wilson heads it home. Looking at Wilson's stats, particularly down the left-hand column, you wouldn't think he was that good a player, but believe me, they improve. Even his heading, it's only listed as being 8, but the number of headers he scored for me when I played as Whitehawk, you know, I think he scored about 6 headers for me that season, which for a player who's only got a heading attribute of 8, that's 6 more than you'd expect from him. So he's a good one to sign. Midfielders, let me think, where is he gone? Tommy Fraser, here he is. Go into his stats. Right, he's also a right back. You can have him as a right back cover or a right midfielder. I tended to play him as the centre midfielder. Centre midfielder. Forgotten what I was saying then. He's got quite a good long shot. I'm trying to find. Now it says 4. I don't believe that for 1 second, because he scored at least 4 goals from outside the box for me in my first season, and this isn't just 20 yards, happened to catch it right and it went in the back of the net. I mean like 25 plus yards, puts his foot through the ball, straight into the roof of the net, past the keeper, past 3 or 4 defenders who are trying to block it. This guy can score good goals. He can also link up well with your other team members. Passing of 10, again that improves. He hasn't got time on his side because he's 25. Although maybe I'm being a bit harsh, because when you think about it, I'm only 21 now, so he's only 4 years older than me. So, I think of myself as being quite young, so I suppose in some ways he is quite young. But he's a good one to sign. Again, covering, can play in lots of different positions. You can retrain him. Good covering player. Defenders, Tom Cadmore. You can see him here. For those of you who've watched You Don't Want Anything with Kids, when I first started creating the team that became Jeffreys United, the team that I replaced was Hazen Yedding, I believe it was. And this guy, Tom Cadmore, used to play for Hazen Yedding, as you can see here. Started his career at Wycombe, never really broke through into the Wycombe team, dropped down to Yedding, then Hazen Yedding, and now Whitehawk. This is his first season at Whitehawk, funny enough. Now when he played for Hazen Yedding, and what became my created team in the database, I kept him, because I looked at his stats, and I just thought, whatever I make in the editor, I don't think it could be better than this guy. Obviously, times have changed a little bit. He hasn't quite reached his full potential. You can see he had 3 seasons in the Skrill Premier, and actually played quite a few games, and scored some goals as well. Excuse me, that's not very good. But things haven't quite worked out, and he's ended up at Whitehawk, which, in my opinion, for him is a step in the right direction, because like I said, I managed to get Whitehawk into the Football League. Centre-back, can also play at right-back. I would mainly play him as a centre-back personally, only play him as a right-back if you really have to. These are his best positions as a centre-back, so, central defender, ball-playing defender. I'd play him as a central defender, if that makes sense. So, central defending role in the central defending position. Those are his best places. Very good player, very reliable. Like I said, he can score goals. He's good. If you want another defender who's versatile, Richard Rose. Again, time is definitely not on this guy's side. He is 30 years old. But he can play right back, he can play left back, he can cross a ball, although you wouldn't think it looking at his stats. I think he was one of my corner takers as well at one point, which shows that stats can change. He's got very good tackling for a non-league defender. Good teamwork, good work rate, very good determination. Again, for those of you who normally play in leagues like League 1 and above, Championship, Premier League, etc., these stats might look atrocious to you, but for me, considering the teams that I normally play as, these are really good stats. Anything that's dark blue like this is good for me. And you can see he can also play as a centre-back, so you can retrain him to play all across the back, centre midfield, and wing back, defence mid. He's very, very versatile. Very, very versatile. Good player. Right, Matt Laurent. He's a good backup man, but again, he's 39 years old, so if you're going to sign him, it's on the short term, really. And again, he can play across the back, and he can play defence midfield. You get this a lot in the non-league as well. You get players who you think are too old. But believe me, if their stats are showing as good, and your scouts and your coaches like them, then they're definitely worth signing for me. Because even though they're old, like Kevin Mayer here, I tend to keep him as well. He plays midfield alongside Fraser. You look at his stats across the board, they're actually pretty good. He's 36 years old. He's lost a little bit of pace, but that's not as important in the non-league, because you don't really get, Ronaldo and Bale style wingers who just tear your defence to pieces. You don't really get that. Non-league football tends to be a lot more physical, so you want players who are strong, which you've kind of got in this team already, really. You don't need to worry too much about increasing strength. You just need depth. You need more players who can play in each position. If you count the number of strikers here, take Robinson out of the equation, because I've never been a fan of his on this game. You got players like Wilson, Mills, who's also a good striker, but I wouldn't actively seek out signing him, because he has 1 or 2 good seasons and then he starts to peak. You got players like Ade, Parsons, who again are good for cover. Not brilliant for first teamers, but good for cover. And like I said, once you brought in Zapata and Barrel Hay, you don't need to worry too much about that, because then you've got at least 3 quality strikers for this division who you can play with. Right, I think that just about covers this team as it stands so far. So what I'm going to do is cut this video here. I'm going to create a basic tactic, work on my scouting and my coaching a little bit, advance time a little bit, and I'll see if I can bring in the players who I actually want to bring in, and then I can show you guys what this team looks like. So I'll be back in a second. Okay guys, we are back, and I've done a little bit of scouting and a little bit of signing, a little bit of releasing in order to make room for these new players. I haven't released anyone off the list that I recommended, so don't worry. I haven't been giving you any red herrings or anything like that. If I go into the team now, you'll see that our squad list is fairly bigger than what it was. I've got Zapata in on trial. I couldn't get Baroilhe in on trial, unfortunately, nor could I get Brian because Hendon wouldn't let him join me on trial. And the idea here is you let them join on trial for a little bit, you let them get to see the club, things like that, and then eventually you try and sign them, and this will turn into a window where you can start negotiating. We are over our wage budget a little bit, which might not help our case. Another player who you can sign as backup is a guy here, Jordan Woodley. Not a bad player. He is just a cover star, really. He comes off the bench every now and then and makes a bit of an impact. Right, I'm going to show you transfers, who we've brought in. So, this guy here, Seb Harris, American, which was a surprise to me because I always remember him being quite an English guy, but there you go. Northampton is where he started his career. He's now at Whitehawk. If you actually look at how old he is, he's 25, and he only really started playing football sort of 5 years ago. So I think he came into the game a little bit late, considering. Striker who can also play centre back. He is a goal scorer. Again, his stats don't tell the whole story. He could be a Skrill Premier striker. He is a very good player. I also brought in this guy here, Tommaso Trani. Highly recommended goalkeeper for me. Good player, as you can see. Again, stats don't tell the full story. If you go into the reports, he could be a League One goalkeeper. So if you hold on to him, train him right, keep him in the team, keep him away from the injury table, you've got a League One goalkeeper on your hands there. Very good player. Who else did I bring in? Simon Locke, another goalkeeper, again, very good stats. He will be our first choice keeper for this season if I was to carry on playing this game. You can see he's not as good as Trani at the moment, and he can only be a League 2 keeper, but in terms of how good he is and what his stats are like here, he always starts off as your first choice keeper, even if Trani then overtakes him in the order as the season goes on. Georgia Callahan, midfielder. Again, look at these stats. Very, very good stats. If you look at his scout rating, very, very good. Leading star for Skrill South teams, which is always good to see. Career Gilbert, covering in defence again, left back and right back, mainly right back though. Good for a Skrill Premier, so again, division above where we are now. Jack Lamp from Concord Rangers. I said they had a couple of good players. See here again, centre back, right back. Could be a good Skrill Premier centre defender. This guy's covering as well. Another player I want to show you from Concord Rangers who's good is this guy here, Tony Stokes. Again, you might not look at it as you might not look at it if you look down his stats, but he is a good player. Unfortunately, excuse me, bad time to yawn. Unfortunately, we can't afford his wages or his transfer fee because he's not a free agent. You see, we have to put in a bid for him. And Concord aren't just going to let him walk out the door because, like I said, he's a good player for them. So the other option is to actually start a career as Concord because, like I said, they've got some very, very good players. Very good players. I was surprised by how good Concord Rangers actually are, and I think in real life they're doing pretty decent at the moment as well, so it is good to see. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Concord, we're here to talk about Whitehawk. Sergio Sanchez, again, cover. Can play right back, centre back, and defence midfield. So he's a good all-rounder. Where's he come from? West Ham. Interesting. And he could become a good Skrill Premier centre back. So again, worth looking at. Fajiri Okinaburhi. Now there's two players at Stevenage who I would recommend looking at. This guy here, Okinaburhi. I can pronounce his name. See, I went to most pre-season friendlies for Stevenage this season, and I spent an awful long time listening to how different PA announcers announced his name, and I've come to the conclusion that it is Okinaburhi. That and the fact that the man himself told me how to say his name. So there you go, Fajiri Okinaburhi. He is one player who I don't actually sign that often, but I see him play against me, and I envy the team he signs for because he is a very, very good prospect. You can see he could become a decent League 2 player. I reckon he can become a decent League 1 player as well if played in the right team. Now he's one player from Stevenage who I would look to sign. The other player is... where is he? There he is. Johan Gesson. Now unfortunately, Stevenage won't loan him out to me because they want him to play with higher quality players. Well, I think it's a bit of baloney, to be honest, but there you go. What can you do? But he is another really good player. He can play all across the attacking midfield, up front, and midfield left and midfield right. So he's a very, very good young player. Him and Okinaburhi can play those wing roles as well as in the advanced midfield position and up front. So very, very good prospect. Harry Milton, again, good cover in the midfield, defence midfield, centre back, and centre midfield. He came from Bishop Stortford, originally from the MK Dons. Not really had any Football League experience so far, and may not have much Football League experience for us either. But as a defensive player, as a covering player, he is a very good player to sign. And he's on pretty cheap wages when you look at it. I mean, that looks like a lot, but when you add it up to some of the other players in the team, it's not that bad at all. And finally, Jamie Smith, winger and attacking midfielder. Again, it's just covering different positions, although he could become a League 2 winger, so that's pretty good. Right, the last thing I want to say is, I'm not just going to tell you guys what players I think you should sign for different teams. I'm going to tell you guys what staff I think you should sign for teams as well, because staff in some cases can be just as important as players. If you have a really, really good coaching team, for example, then you could turn a team of average players into a team of good players. Now, unfortunately, Whitehawk have a very, very tight policy when it comes to staff. Coaches, for example, you can have an assistant manager because they come under their own bracket, but other staff like coaches and physios, you can only have two at the start. So you can have a coach and you can have a physio. Now I've got a goalkeeping coach here, Alan Judge. He wasn't the best goalkeeping coach available to be on the list, but he was the one who fitted most inside my my wage structure, and he has a goalkeeping rating of 16. Excuse me, yawning again. I probably should stop recording videos in the evenings. But yeah, sorry about that, guys. Goalkeeping of 16, which, considering it's out of 20, and this is a Skrill Premier, a Skrill South team, that's good. That is good. That affects the team massively, because then you've got a decent goalkeeping coach making your goalkeepers better throughout the season. Assistant manager, we've got Paul Bennett, who's actually listed as a coach normally, but you make him your assistant manager because he's got some pretty good attacking and defending stats. He's got good man management and he's good with youngsters. And you'll notice in our team we have a lot of youngsters. Players between the ages of say 17, like Okinaburhi here, and say 23 here. You see how many players we've actually got below that bracket compared to the amount above that bracket, and you can see why this stat here is so important. Director of football, we've got a pretty decent director of football in John Milton. Again, wasn't the best on the list, but in terms of his stats compared to his wages, it's a pretty decent fit for us. And again, I think he's listed as a scout, as is our head of youth development, this guy down here, Bobby Roberts. And the stat that I look for most when it comes to a head of youth development is judging player potential, because although the head of youth development also has an impact on coaching, I tend to treat them as a scout more than anything, because I have them go out and search for players for the future for me as well. Although maybe you could argue that I should start looking at their coaching stats a little bit more as well, and I might do that in future series, but I'm not going to worry about that in this one. Physio, we've got Damien Delahunty, who's got 16 out of 20 for physio, which is good. Scouts, we've got Lee Mabry, who I always recommend. I believe I had him in my You Don't Win Anything with Kids series as well as one of my scouts, so he's a good one to sign. As is this guy here, Gavin Tate. Considering this is a non-league team, very, very non-league team, to have two scouts like that hunting players for you, if I go onto the list here now, you can see the kind of players we're getting up on this list. It's always, always good. Got some pretty decent young players on here, and again, if you look at their ages, although I've set it up to be like this, if I get rid of this one here, if you look at their ages, they tend to be quite young. So we've got a pretty decent setup going on here. We are a little bit over budget, but you can sort of manipulate that slightly as you go along. You can ask your board for a higher wage budget, and you know, sometimes if they believe you're doing it for the right reasons, they'll give it to you. Okay guys, this video wasn't quite as detailed as I wanted it to be. I didn't quite have enough time to do the research that I wanted to do, but this is a pretty decent team for me, and depending on what you guys want me to do, if you want me to run this along as a simulation for a little bit and say come back in January further down the line and show you guys how this team are doing, just to prove that these are some pretty decent players, I'm quite happy to do that. But the very next episode that will be coming up in this series will be for Skrill Premier teams. And again, it'll be the similar basis if I show you what staff members and what players you can sign, bargain buys, advice, little things like that. And hopefully it'll be a little bit better than this video as well, because the first one's always the worst as far as I'm concerned. So I look forward to that. Hopefully you guys look forward to that. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, be sure to click the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed to my channel, thank you guys for your continued support. And until next time, I will see you soon.